every pair of trousers, every woman's bra, every single article of this clothing in this room was assembled outside the United States by cheap labor using secondary materials because of a trade system that both parties working together have put into place. And last and least, of course, a foreign policy, which, while seemingly extremely expensive, appears to be entirely incoherent, unless, of course, our goal was to strengthen the Muslim Brotherhood, enhance their position around the world, put them into power while undercutting our traditional allies like Israel and others. So the American people finally got to a point where they said, enough. And now we have President Donald Trump 100 days into his first administration. Now, I do a lot of these, talk show formats where they put you up against a Democrat. And in fact, I did one last night on WIOND with Fernando Mondi, the liberal that conservatives love to hate.
Yeah.
The last guy in the country with the David Cassidy haircut. I said to him, how's that whole Partridge Family thing working for you? He had a very good forum last night. I was on versus a fellow named Simon Rosenberg, I think it was, who was had been a Clintonista. And of course, you recognize the liberals expected that in 100 days, Donald Trump would be able to undo 30 years of bad decisions and stupid decisions and government policies and regulations that were designed to destroy job creation and stifle the free expression and creativity of the American people. And it doesn't work that way. The truth is, in 100 days, Donald Trump has signed more executive orders, more legislation to lay the groundwork for a resurgence of the American dream, to strengthen the forces of law and order, to strengthen the forces of those who seek to create jobs in this country, and those who seek opportunity for their families. But these reformed loyalists for Donald Trump, and if you know me, that's not me. I mean, let me be clear. I'm 100% for Donald Trump, and I am very loyal to a man who's been a loyal friend of mine for some 40 years. But that doesn't mean the generals and the Obama administration appointees and the CIA and the Defense Department and riddled throughout the existing government won't try to con him. Doesn't mean they won't try to co-opt him. I mean, I come to this from a strange place. On the one hand, upon reflection, I support the limited surgical strike into Syria. On the other hand, no, I'm sorry, I don't believe Assad gassed his people. It defies logic.
Yeah, that's right.
He agreed over a year ago to terms with the Obama administration. He signed an agreement with the UN, which the Russians, who are his patrons, who he must have their support for survival, certified the agreement that he had no chemical weapons. Why would he embarrass his patrons, who he must have to survive, by using chemical weapons on his own people when he has the upper hand in this so-called war against the rebels anyway, and not being a dope from a public relations point of view, had to know that the entire world community would see those horrific photos of dying children and come down on him. So, my congratulations to the CIA. They did a good job of that false flag operation. I don't know who they got to do their dirty work, but I doubt that he used chemical weapons against his own people. There's a funny thing about our intelligence services. When they don't know shit, they use the word assessment. Anytime they say assessment, I want you to be trained now. When they say the word assessment, the overwhelming evidence is that they're lying. That means that that's a guess or a projection, supposition, conjecture. It's the way they would like it to be. So of course I was upset when I saw that the Justice Department under the Trump administration is considering indicting Julian Assange. This is Julian Assange that Donald Trump said he loved in the election. This is the Julian Assange who every single document on the Clintons that he has published has proven to be true.
That's right.
Folks, we have to distract you from the content of what we've learned, so we're going to start this whole controversy about how he got it. No, he didn't get it from the Russians. That's a lie. When CIA Director Mike Pompeo says Assange is a Russian asset, no, Mr. Pompeo, you lie. Give us the proof. Give us the evidence. Evidence that would stand up in a U.S. court of law. You have none, Pompeo. The generals are whispering in your ear. You see, they need him to be a Russian asset. And they need there to be, non-existent, Russian collusion with the Trump campaign because they used it as their excuse to justify illegal wiretapping of conversations between Donald Trump and some of his advisors. Susan Rice and Valerie Jarrett and the other people of Obama broke the law Watergate style, and now they must go to prison just as those around Nixon went to prison for using the government to spy on the Republican nominee for president. The Senate and the House Intelligence Committees into Russian collusion will produce nothing, folks. It's a canard, it's a fraud, it's a lie, it's a meme. It's a narrative invented by John Podesta, the chairman of the Clinton campaign. You see, John and his brother Tony and Bill and Hillary and that greedy, foul-mouthed, nasty little daughter of theirs, they made millions off of the clique around Putin. The uranium deal, the bank deal, the gas deal. Yes, they were absolutely right. There was a presidential campaign in bed with Putin. There was a candidate in bed with Putin. There was a candidate whose top aides were making money off their relations with Putin. The problem is that candidate was Hillary Clinton. And they tell us no person is above the law. Well, then it's time for Attorney General Sessions to convene a grand jury, and let's call Valerie Jarrett, and let's call Susan Rice, and let's call, yes, the president himself. What did the president know, and when did he know it? It's time for Barry to step into the grand jury box.
Yeah.
Because all Americans equal, that's what they tell us. The Clinton Foundation, I need to tell you, this is not a charity. This is a scam. This is a fraud. This is a slush fund for grifters. This is a vehicle that Bill and Hillary used for the facilitation of multi-million-dollar bribes. Federal marshals need to arrive in Chappaqua and handcuff both of them and perp walk them out like they would if you did what they did.
What are they waiting for?
Good question.
Yeah, what's going on?
But first, a little bit of news.
What they're waiting for is, Comey is one of their people.
As I indicated, the president was informed several days ago that the that the Supreme Court Justice, I'm looking for a piece of information for you that I think you will find interesting. I think that the president has been informed that the Supreme Court Justice, Anthony Kennedy, will very shortly announce his retirement, which will give Donald Trump his second seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, in the first 100 days, Donald Trump got a Supreme Court Justice, Neil Gorsuch, a fine conservative jurist, solid individual, someone who has expressed in their judicial opinions severe reservations about the need for the limits of the power of government. And it is the first U.S. Supreme Court confirmation within the 100 days of a presidency since 1881. And now I am telling you that my sources tell me that Justice Kennedy will step down. Neil Hartigan, who is a judge from Western Pennsylvania, who many believe was the kind of runner-up in the last process of selection for the Supreme Court. A conservative, but an establishment conservative, is considered by many to be the front runner, largely because he is a favorite of Marianne Trump Berry, the president's sister, who is a prominent and respected federal judge from New Jersey, put on the bench by President Ronald Reagan, elevated on the bench by President Bill Clinton. Also, I can tell you that the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman, Senator Grassley, whose support is crucial to a nominee because the nominee must first pass the Senate Judiciary Committee, favors the appointment of Stephen Colleton, who is a judge of the 8th Circuit of Appeals. And my sources are that he has a hammerlock on the administration pushing Judge Colleton. And then there is the dark horse. Many people believe the candidate of the president himself, Judge Andrew Napolitano, an esteemed former New Jersey state judge, and of course the legal analyst that we enjoy so much on Fox News. I believe Napolitano is a real dark horse in this selection. He will not be the establishment choice, but he is known to be a personal favorite of the president. So there you have it. Before you hear it on CNN and Fox and CBS and NBC, the Supreme Court sweepstakes are indeed about to begin. Speaking of the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees, I will release tomorrow letters I have received from both committees as we move towards the question of testifying. I am anxious to testify. I am jonesing to testify. I think that certain demagogues need to be put in their place, that certain members of the House and Senate who have engaged in what I call the new McCarthyism, who have made baseless, fraudulent, inaccurate charges about Russian involvement in this election when they can prove nothing. FactCheck.org, financed by the Hindenburg Foundation, not exactly a right-wing think tank, has taken the charges of Congressman Adam Schiff has made against me and determined that they are without foundation, that he claims I knew about John Podesta's email being hacked in advance. That's a lie, folks. There's no evidence of it. I never said it. I never claimed it. It can't be proven. I was on to the fact that Podesta was a crook pretty early, and I said that he would come under public scrutiny, but that's not exactly the same thing. And they made a great deal out of the fact that I claimed before this group and others that WikiLeaks had a plethora of material on Hillary Clinton. It was devastating, and they would release this in October. Now, I said this on August 15th. That would, of course, come to happen, and therefore people said, well, that's proof Stone knew in advance. Well, of course I knew advance. I could read the Twitter posting of WikiLeaks on July 31st in which they said, we have a huge amount of information on Hillary Clinton and we will drop it in October. So you see, I knew the big secret. This is typical of liberals. They are looking for a headline, and then of course there was this smear pertaining to Guccifer 2.0. Guccifer 2.0 is a legendary hacker. The CIA says he's a Russian asset. That's how you can be sure he's not. He was actively involved by his own admission in the effort to hack some of the DNC material, which proved that Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Clintons had to conspire and cheat to stop Bernie Sanders in Iowa, where they actually stopped the vote count because they knew he was on his way to winning. And had he won Iowa, he would have won the nomination. And then they rigged the rules. So now, because they think you're stupid, we have to distract from what we learned. So let's cause a big question about how you got this document. Who cares? It showed that Wasserman Schultz is a liar. It showed that Hillary Clinton is a cheater. And nobody's disputed the accuracy of these documents. It's been over 180 days since Seth Rich, who was not a low-level IT employee, but was a division head at the DNC for their entire IT operation, was shot in the back of the head at 3 o'clock in the morning in Washington, D.C. Sounds like a robbery to me. Immediately afterwards, Craig Murray, who was a UK diplomat of some distinction and quite respected, said that Rich had handed him some of the actual DNC documents that would go to WikiLeaks, which WikiLeaks would ultimately publish. The New York Times has never reported that fact. Shame on you, New York Times. The Washington Post has never reported it either. 280 plus days later, the DC Metropolitan Police still have no idea who killed Mr. Rich. Mr. Rich's parents have changed their story several times. That's somewhat sad. First, they disputed that this was a robbery since his cash and his wallet and his jewelry was intact. But now they say that questions about who killed their son are hurtful. Sorry for the hurt. We need to know who killed Seth Rich. I want to know, don't you? Because I think he was killed to silence him. The National Enquirer last week had a story speculating that the Russians killed him. No, sorry, I don't agree. The Russians had no reason to kill him. He was more likely killed by someone connected to the presidential aspirations of Hillary Clinton. Anyone who has read the Clintons' War on Women, a terrific book, knows that murder is most certainly within the oeuvre of the former president. There are just, I'm sorry, a disproportionate number of people who conveniently disappear or die when it comes to covering up the venal corruption and the malfeasance and treason of the Clintons. Speaking of which, this whole idea that Trump colluded with the Russians and that that's treasonous, well, the Obama-Clinton administration is the one that transferred $1 billion of technology to the Russians and did nothing when Putin rolled into Crimea, did nothing when he rolled into Syria. Bill Clinton himself gave $1 billion worth of technology to the Russians, and they used it to build an impenetrable bunker in the Ural Mountains against a future U.S. attack. Bill also took $600,000 in illegal Chinese campaign contributions in return for selling missile targeting technology used by the United States to the Chinese so they could really know how to take care of us. If there's anybody who should be charged with treason, if there's anybody who should be sitting in a penitentiary right now, it would be William Jefferson Clinton. I just gave you two examples of real treason. So we are 100 days in. The deep state, which has been leaking against General Flynn, leaking against the president. Remember the stories about the president's phone calls with foreign leaders and how disjointed and embarrassing that they were? How could those possibly get out in public? Who would have copies of them or who would have knowledge? It is the deep state of Hillary Clinton, and they seek to stop our president. Let me say this. Donald Trump is not perfect. When he does something I don't agree with, I'm going to say so publicly. But here's what I do know after being his friend for 40 years. When he has all the information, he almost always makes the right decision. You see, he's an American. He believes in American sovereignty. He believes in American strength. He believes in American exceptionalism. He believes in the American dream. He understands that low taxes and low regulation are what spur human ingenuity and free enterprise, and that a rising tide lifts all boats. He's not a bigot. He's not an anti-Semite. He's not a hater. Those are all lies that are used against him. But he does believe that all Americans should be treated equally. He wants to rebuild our inner cities. He wants to return and restore economic opportunity for all Americans. And he's realized the way that the two-party duopoly has played off the minority community and the Hispanic community and the Asian community against each other, and how the Democrats have mined the votes of people of color for hundreds of years, but delivered nothing. Delivered nothing. So it's a new day. I wish I could tell you that all of the dangers. I mean, I would point out two things. The word politics comes from the Latin. Poly meaning many, ticks meaning bloodsuckers. The other thing I would point out to you is that the president faces opponents who are intractable and who've had things their way for 30 years. An enormous mistake not replacing the second and third levels of the Obama administration. At the Central Intelligence Agency today, there's only one man who is theoretically loyal to the president. That would be the director. He hasn't appointed any of the people below him. We're still relying on the patriotism and discretion and confidentiality of Obama appointees. Very dangerous. But my faith is with Trump. I believe that he will, in the end, if we continue to support him, and if he is given the correct information, he will continue to fight for a reform agenda that is going to continue to aggravate and confound official Washington.
Correct. Because
the sad truth is that most of the politicians in the system, they like things the way they are. Tax and spend, hit the special interests at the cocktail party for a massive contribution, go along to get along, don't ever rock the boat, follow the party leadership, everybody gets reelected, the members of Congress have free health care, they don't have to worry about medical bills like you and I. They have all kinds of special privileges. They don't even have to belong to a health club. They've got a house gym, a steam room. They get a nice massage after a game of racquetball paid for by you, the taxpayers. So it's a pretty soft deal. And sadly, so many of those in our party like things the way they are. Now, like you, I was disappointed by the effort to replace Obamacare. My biggest disappointment is that I don't think our proposal was very good. I think we could do much better. In fact, I think the president's proposal was written by John Boehner, a lobbyist for the healthcare industry. He gave it to Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ryan gave it to Mr. Priebus. Mr. Priebus gave it to the president, told him it's ours. For all I know, the president thinks that the policy boys in the White House whipped this together, but we know better. And had I been in the House, in all honesty, I might have voted against it. Now, it's a step in the right direction. We need a more market-based approach, but when the President of the United States is attacking members of the Freedom Caucus, this makes no sense. Those are his most natural allies.
Yeah.
Those are the outsiders of the Republican Party, the non-establishment Republicans. Why are we attacking them? All they want is a more market-based system. I'd rather see the president attacking liberal Democrats like Nancy Pelosi than conservative Republicans like Ron Paul. This makes no sense to me. Very happy that the president, after some of his longtime advisors spoke to him, met with Senator Paul 2 Saturdays ago, and we begin to have the beginning of a cooperative relationship. You know what? The media wants to talk endlessly about how Trump failed on Obamacare. They like talking about spilled milk. Over, finished, done. Okay, he made a mistake. Donald Trump never suffers when he tries and fails. He only suffers when he stops trying, when he stops fighting. That proposal didn't work, let's put up the next proposal. And if that doesn't work, let's put up the next proposal. So it is with the travel ban. So you've got two snotty federal judges seeking their 15 minutes of fame, overreaching their authority, and overruling the President of the United States on a matter of national security. I don't blame Donald Trump. I'd only blame him if he didn't put the travel ban forward and try to push it. And now he needs to do it again, and again, and again. And ultimately, he needs to, if necessary, issue it as an executive order and order it and make them stop administering it at the borders. Let them try that. He has to push to the limits of his constitutional power. Let them challenge what he can and cannot do. I mean, in defense of the president, it's not like, say, Lyndon Johnson, who was in the House and the Senate, and sat there as vice president watching closely to see how everything worked. It's not like Richard Nixon, 8 years as vice president watching Dwight Eisenhower, a master, by the way, one of the most underrated presidents. He wanted to give you the idea that he was slightly befuddled and confused. Like hell, he was tough as nails and he was running the show. And when the boys at the Pentagon said, oh, we need deficit spending, Mr. President, we can only kill every person in the world 20 times, we need to be able to pay for it to be 30. No, Eisenhower said no. We had a balanced budget during the entire time Eisenhower was president, despite the fact he was a military man, and the military was calling for a budget-busting buildup. And America was sufficiently strong to ward off foreign aggressors. So, unlike, say, Nixon or Johnson, Donald Trump has not been studying for this moment his entire life. And it will take some reasonable amount of time to figure out where the levers of power are. Who are the 20 most important guys in government? Who are the 20 men or women you must appoint first? And then who are the next 20? And the next 20? It will take some time, but the president is a natural. He is a quick learner. He's got the executive ability to call good people together, to get the best information possible, and then to make decisions. And therefore, my confidence continues to lie in him. At this point, I would be happy to take a few questions, and then we'll sign a few votes. Yes, sir.
I heard you last night and you were stellar.
Thank you.
Question, I'm concerned for President Trump's safety. Should I be?
I share your concern, and I think we have to be, because the story of history. I wrote an entire book on the Kennedy assassination. You cannot look at the facts objectively and not come to the conclusion that the U.S. Secret Service had to lay down on JFK. The rule book for the Secret Service says that if the president is driving between two multi-story buildings, that those buildings have to be searched, all the windows closed and locked and sealed. That's the requirement. John Kennedy was in Miami and Chicago in the days before he was in Dallas, and in both cases, he drove by tall multi-story buildings and they were searched and sealed in advance. The manual says there have to be plainclothes agents interspersed throughout the crowd, but in Dallas there were none. The manual says a minimum of 6 motorcycled officers, 3 on either side of the motorcade. There were only 2. 4 were sent home from the airport by their superiors. And those 2 were supposed to be at the rear axle on either side, are decidedly behind the presidential car. Supposed to be an agent on the rear bumper, but if you go to YouTube, you can see him being ordered by his superiors to stand down. So one cannot examine the Kennedy assassination and not determine that the Secret Service suspends all their normal operating procedures for some reason. In the case of the attempt on President Ronald Reagan, people don't realize this, but the government has never released a final report on what transpired. We are told that John Hinckley shot President Kennedy, President Nixon, President Reagan. We're told that the bullet that lodges in the president's chest ricochets off of a car door. It's not clear that we have any evidence of a nick or a dent in said car door. The number of bullets doesn't add up. There are too many bullets based on the fact that at least 2, one hits a police officer and 2 hit across the street. The photograph taken by Michael Evans, the White House photographer, the broader photograph, which you have famously seen, of Reagan with his hand in the air, waving, seconds before he shot. If you look at the balcony above the hotel door, you can clearly see a man in the act of holding a gun. If you go to my book, The Bush Crime Family, you'll see a blow-up of that photo. Leslie Stahl, then with CBS, Judy Woodruff, then with NBC, both identified the man standing in the doorway. Go look at that for that now on YouTube. You can't find it. I have it cached. It's been erased. I've interviewed both of them. They don't remember it, although I've seen the video of them saying it. So all I'm saying is there are multiple questions about at least two previous attempts on lives of American presidents. Am I disparaging the men and women of the U.S. Secret Service? No, I think, they are overwhelmingly patriotic, loyal Americans prepared to put their life in the line of duty for the president's life. But President Trump so threatens the New World Order, so threatens what they want to do with the globalist takeover of this country, that by definition, I believe his life must always be in some danger. And I know the people who provide his personal security that have gone over from the Trump organization to government, and they are NYPD veterans and solid experts when it comes to executive protection. But the bottom line of this, quite simply, is join me every night in praying for our president's safety. It's what I do.
You see, or could you compare and maybe contrast Lenin and Stalin and how they got to power in Russia and what's going on here? Especially when you see Vince Foster and the rest of the crew just eliminated.
This, I think, speaks to the greatest danger that we face, a danger that you may not even yet be aware of. 2016 marked the end of the mainstream media monopoly on the dissemination of political information. Prior to 2016, I would argue that a majority of American voters were getting their news from ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and CNN. And that was bad because they were getting a very structured, pro-establishment, pro-Hillary, anti-Trump narrative from those outlets. But with the invention of the internet and the trend for a majority of Americans now to get their news from their handheld device, instead of the television set that's in the living room or the kitchen, it opens the door to a vibrant and robust alternative media. Meaning, if you don't like what the New York Times says, you can go read Breitbart. If you think CNN is full of shit, they are, you can go to Infowars.com. If you think that the Washington Post is kind of regurgitated establishment pablum, then you can go to the Daily Caller. And that revolution is what opens the door to Trump's presidency. Now, the internet giants, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, are using manipulation of their algorithms and the National Censorship Board set up under Barack Obama in 2016, which gives the government the power to decide what's fake and what's real. And they are blocking my access and reach to you. They are blocking the reach of outlets like Infowars.com. So while millions of people were watching in October, that's down to hundreds of thousands now. In my case, while 250,000 people saw the Stone Cold Truth every day in October, that number is down to less than 5,000 today, as they fakely manipulate the internet in a dozen different technical ways to limit our reach.
Wow.
It's illegal. It's a violation of the antitrust rules. It will either get resolved in a antitrust action by the Trump Justice Department, a class action lawsuit, or an uprising of the American people who just won't stand for it. And if we have to ruin Facebook financially and go elsewhere with our business, of course, we can. In the end, it is your power as a consumer. We've made them very rich, and now they're using our money to shut us down.
Yeah.
That's why I urge you, whenever you see a clip of me, whether it's on Infowars or Stone Cold Truth or any place that you like, retweet it. Stick it up in your feed and get it out. You see, the more of us there are, the harder it is for them to do. You will read that the Russian state has used bots and all kinds of internet tricks to benefit Donald Trump. That's a lie. The Russians may have looked at Media Matters for America and their disgusting trolls attacking us, smearing us, lying about us, and duplicated what these creeps are doing. But let's just be clear. Soros is a criminal. He needs to be apprehended, tried, and put in prison. You cannot go out and pay people to advocate the violent murder of the President of the United States. It's a crime.
Yeah.
Handcuff him, bring him in for trial, let him stand trial. If his bodyguards get unruly, shoot them. This
You'll have him in the morning.
Is there a bounty on him?
No, but there certainly should be.
Yeah.
The Hungarians very clearly are not putting up with his antics. Across Europe, you see governments revolting against his efforts to manipulate things. He's a criminal. He can be prosecuted just like any other criminal. Yes.
What are the rumors with Jared's connection to Soros? Is that all BS or?
I honestly don't know. Jared is a question mark to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what the truth is regarding allegations of his company, real estate, his family, real estate business, and the Russians. I have no idea if there's nothing there, if there's something there. Like you, I will be very interested to see his testimony. I mean, I think Jared's heart is in the right place. I think when he tells the president to become more conventional, to send troops to Syria, to join the New World Order, he probably thinks he's helping him. He's not. He's not. This isn't about whether Jared and Ivanka are well received at the right cocktail parties on
That's
the
right.
Upper West Side. It's about whether or not Donald Trump will remain true to the revolution. I like Jared Kushner. He's a very smart guy. He's a liberal Democrat. I'm sure he can argue liberal Democrat BS all day, but it's not liberal Democrats who elected Donald Trump.
That's right.
And it is not kowtowing to the establishment or to the Democrats that is going to keep the president's governing coalition intact.
How can we get Trump to see that his daughter and Jared are liberal Democrats?
Well, maybe he is seeing it. We know this, that all of his advisors told him to send 150,000 troops to Syria as the follow-up to the surgical strike on the airbase. And the good news is there was one guy in the White House who was opposed and who said, no, we're not doing that. And that person was Donald Trump. So again, I'm relying on the good judgment and the instincts of the man I've known for 40 years. I don't think a year and a half we're going to be talking about the influence of Jared Kushner. That's just my view.
What's happening with Bannon? Is he still around?
He is physically still around. The question is whether he will assert himself on behalf of an agenda. Where was he on the question of Syria? Where was he on the question of some of these issues? Well, where was he on the question of whether Julian Assange should be indicted? Did he say, no, Mr. President, that's ridiculous? When we start indicting journalists and start requiring them to resolve their sources, who's next?
But Julian especially. Oh my
Yes, sir.
goodness.
Do you have any insight into the death of Judge Anthony Scalia?
I'm working on a long piece on this, which I will publish fairly soon. It is one of those things kind of like the Kennedy assassination, where there are just too many unanswered questions. There are just too many things in the narrative that are illogical, that don't make sense, and very much like the Kennedy situation, you see, when a person dies in Texas, an autopsy is legally required. None was conducted on JFK, and none was conducted on Judge Scalia. Why? It's just a reasonable question. That doesn't mean we're conspiracy theorists. No. The Russians helped Trump get elected even though we have no proof. Now that's a conspiracy theory. A left-wing, elitist conspiracy theory. Yes,
You
sir.
mentioned that obviously some problems in the CIA, but I thought Trump was very happy with Pompeo.
That's an interesting question. I don't know how he can be. Pompeo seems to be giving the president advice that is inconsistent with what he said before the election. So let's see. Pompeo was among those saying, Mr. President, send 150,000 troops to Syria. Advice which the president wisely rejected. Have we learned nothing in Afghanistan? Have we learned nothing in Iraq? Did we learn nothing whatsoever in Libya? I mean, this is the story of Syria. There's no question that Gaddafi was not a sweetheart, but in Libya, a woman could go to college, could go to grad school, could drive a car, could hold a job, could travel without the permission of her husband, could marry the person of their choice, could appear in public without a veil. And under the law in Libya, if a woman was raped, the rapist would be prosecuted and punished. Today, any of those acts will get a woman stoned to death. When Gaddafi was in power, when you reached the age of 18, you were given a college education, you were given health care for life, you were given, if you were married, a home, and encouraged to have children. None of those things are true anymore. Hillary and Barack Obama wanted regime change. Regime change is code words for remove what they have now, replace it with something far worse and more dangerous to the United States. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming in. It's a pleasure to hear you again. You talked about regime change. Nikki Haley had actually mentioned that. What's your thoughts on that? As far as because actually I shared the same sentiment as far as Assad. I'm very skeptical that he actually bombed his own people. But I hear Nikki Haley again, like I said, saying regime change. What's your thought on that?
Nikki Haley, of course, is one of the nominations that surprises me by the president. Never particularly a favorite of the president. She fairly savagely attacked him during the campaign.
Yeah, let's get rid of that one.
And many people believe that the president appointed Nikki Haley to the UN, a job that is, in all honesty, not all that important because the UN had never done anything or accomplished anything, in order to have her step aside as governor so Lieutenant Governor Henry McMaster could become governor. McMaster being a very good man, a Trump man, and a very solid supporter of the president. So when I look for neocon sentiments in the new administration, I look at Nikki Haley. Regime change is a bad idea for this obvious reason. Assad finances Hezbollah, finances Hamas, propped up by the Russians, certainly a dictator. I don't think he used chemical weapons on his people most recently, but I think he has in the past. And on the other side, you have, God knows, 1,000 little subsect of Islamic fanatic maniacs, the largest of which this collection of nutcases is ISIS, propped up by the Saudis. So, on which side are our friends? Neither. Why would we spend $1 of borrowed American money, because frankly, we don't have the bread to bomb Syria today, we'd have to borrow it, as we did in Libya, or a single drop of American blood, when neither result is good for us?
Yeah.
How about not our business?
Yeah, nice.
Obviously, the Syrian refugee crisis is heart-rendering, but we cannot be the world's policeman. And when we have tried, we have seen the cost to ourselves in terms of dollar and treasure.
We make things worse.
Indeed, yes.
I kind of I agree with him about Syria. I agree that I think they did wrong, whatever. But if they did it, then who do you think did?
Us?
No,
Yeah, our
not
CIA
I mean,
did
use
that.
chemical weapons, I mean. You're saying they didn't. So who did?
I don't think Assad did it. I think it was a false flag.
Use
Well,
chemical weapons?
I don't think we would do it ourselves. We would cause others to do it.
Was Israel involved?
Terrific piece on Zero Edge about the false flag. It's my instinct, there's a lot of evidence regarding the actual chemical attack that would indicate that it was done by a third party, done as a provocation. Donald Trump is a father. He's a husband. how could you look at pictures of dying children and not be affected? I understand it emotionally, but no, I think it is illogical that he launched the attack.
Okay, so why would they, now the next question is why would they want?
Inducement for war.
Provoke, to
Yeah, to
induce
provoke.
war.
Which is war. The military would like us to launch a Afghanistan,
Yeah.
Iraq type boots on the ground war in Syria. Exactly what Donald Trump ran against in the election.
Yeah.
That, if Hillary Clinton were elected, we'd already have troops there. You would have gotten a no-fly zone, which is an open invitation for war to the Russians. If you look at a map, by the way, you will see that Syria is much closer to Russia than it is to the United States. Our inherent interests, to me, would be more obvious in, say, Canada or Mexico. I think war over Syria is a mistake.
Who has the
But if you say that today, I'm against war over Syria with the Russians, they say, ah, you're a Russian agent. You must be a traitor to the United States. No, I'm just against war. Or, put it conversely, I'd like to give peace a chance. I'd like to see Trump try to negotiate with Putin. Putin's no sweetheart. He's a killer.
Yeah, he's bad.
He's a former KGB agent. Their system's not a great system. It stinks. It's totalitarianism. They oppress gays. They oppress women. They oppress Jews. They oppress Christians. There's nothing great about their system. I don't love their system. I hate their system. I got into politics because of the anti-communism of Barry Goldwater, because of the anti-communism of Ronald Reagan. But could we sit down and talk before we go to war?
Yeah.
If Nixon and Brezhnev can reach agreement on the limitation of nuclear warheads, then maybe Trump and Putin can come to an accommodation that averts world war. Give peace a chance. In the old days, it was the liberals who said that, and we said they were soft. Now we're for peace, and they say we're traitors. Yes, sir.
I heard something today about they have a golf course in South Korea that has the anti-ballistic missiles ready, and they're ready for war with North Korea. What do you know about that?
I tell you, I know nothing about that, but the fact that the CIA director is in South Korea having discussions, I suspect means that we are preparing for an action. Let's be clear. If the assault in Syria achieved nothing else, it sent a very strong signal to the North Koreans and to the Iranians and to the Chinese, who had a ringside seat. And that is simply this. In Donald Trump, you do not have a leader who will draw a line in the sand and sit back helplessly and watch our adversaries cross that line. And I say this because I know the man and I've known him 40 years. If the 27-year-old North Korean leader wants to test Donald Trump, it will be the largest, single, greatest mistake he will ever make in his life.
I said the same thing to my husband, just last time, the whole argument about it.
Donald Trump is no
I think
marshmallow.
he's gonna have a problem.
He's no marshmallow, and he's about to prove it to the world community. One more question, and then we'll sign a few books. Yes?
Yes. Well, how are you feeling after you were hit by a hit-and-run car this medicine?
I am feeling fine. It's interesting yesterday that I had not really focused on all of the attempts on the life of Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is the British patriot who is trying to fight globalism in that country. He is the guy who spearheaded the Brexit vote, which everybody said would fail. Just like Trump couldn't win, Brexit couldn't win, but it did. And they have, severed the brakes of his car. They have tried to fiddle with the engine of a plane he was on. A plane he was on crashed, and the pilot to this day is a vegetable. I mean, they have very definitely tried to kill Nigel Farage. So now I don't feel so alone. For those of you who don't know, my doctor believed I was poisoned back around August, at the time that the House first mentioned a desire to have me testify. And then miraculously, right after the Senate announced an intention to have me come testify, I was in a hit and run accident where a car came out of nowhere from our right, full speed, this matte gray four-door sedan with the windows tinted so dark that you couldn't see who was in it, hit us at full speed, smashed in the right side of my colleague's car. The airbags deployed, which I think protected me from more serious injury, and then threw it in reverse and took off. The damage to their car not being as great as the damage to our car. And the license tag on the car, when run by the Broward County Sheriff's Office, proved to be a counterfeit tag, a fake tag.
What kind of color is it?
Hard to say. It was like a matte gray four-door Pontiac, Chrysler, I don't know, a large American
I
car.
mean, was government issued sedan.
Conceivably, yes.
You look a lot better than you did on Alex's program a couple months ago.
Well, there's a testimony for you. It's Mrs. Stone's home cooking, I must tell you. I've gained a pound or two. One more question for the good of the order. Yes, sir, Joe.
What do you think about the different factions in the Republican Party? I mean, I really believed when Donald Trump became president, and we had all of these Republicans elected, that these guys were gonna go to Washington and they were gonna get his agenda passed. And it seems like we're our own worst enemy, constantly.
I think that you have to look at the Reagan model. The truth is, there were a lot of Republicans within the party who opposed Reagan, who supported his election only grudgingly. But as the president put forward programs that the people found popular, well, then the congressmen and the senators had to run out ahead of the crowd so they could look like they were leaders. If the president will put forward the kind of dynamic, pro-growth economic plan that I know he has in mind, and you're a Republican congressman and you're so dumb that you stayed in the way, you too will be swept out of the way. The key is, give us something we can support. The Obamacare bill was not it, unfortunately. So let's chalk that up to a mistake. Trump's not perfect, he wouldn't claim to be perfect. It's an error. It's also over. It's also in the past, and therefore, let's come up with a bill that is so free market oriented that all Republicans get on board, whether you're a country club, Jeb Bush, line your pockets Republican, or whether you're an economic and foreign policy conservative, or whether you're a libertarian conservative, or whether you're a social issue conservative. The key is to put forward policies that are popular enough to hold together the base of the Trump supporters and get a few conservative Democrats, the kind who voted for Trump in Western Pennsylvania and in the Milwaukee area and in the Detroit area. It can be done. It calls for some brinkmanship. Thank you very much for